heard people from time immemorial trying to argue that, oh, there's no future land promise for Israel. That got fulfilled in the Solomonic reign, or they want to run it back to the time of Joshua. And it just doesn't work. I call it the ram, jam, and cram method.
This is Olivier with Shalom and Messiah. And today, for this episode, I have a dear friend of mine. I have not had him on the show for a while because he's been busy. I've been busy, but we've done many programs together. And friends, frankly, he is one of my go-to for theology and doctrine. And I'm so delighted to have him on the show today. We're going to talk about several things. One of them, of course, being Israel and current events. But I have a lot of questions to ask him, and I'm looking forward to it. So also want to remind you to subscribe to our Telegram channel at Shalom and Messiah updates on Telegram. It's a new channel, and we are I am posting many times a day articles and videos and commentaries on current events, Bible, prophecy, Israel, antisemitism, end times, things you can trust. It's hard to find information you can trust. And so go to our Telegram channel. I will be posting quite a bit from Israel when I'm there in a few weeks. So you definitely want to subscribe now. And also we do have our daily devotional on another YouTube channel at Olivier Melnick Devotional. You want to subscribe to that separately. And visit our website at shalomandmessiah.com. So I want to bring my good friend, and here he is on the screen, Dr. Andy Woods. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Olivier, good to be with you today.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a while. It's been a while since we've been together on the show. I haven't been to Sugarland in a while as well. The last time I was there, I think, was February. Now, you do have, briefly, you do have another conference coming up. I know it's down the road, but people need to know when and where.
2026, February. Oh my goodness, I should know the date, shouldn't I? I want to say 20th to the 21st, right in there.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, we'll get that information before your show's over. But it's going to be great, regardless of what day it's going to be held. It's actually 2 days.
It's
A Friday,
19th and 20th.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
19th all day Friday, 20th all day Saturday, banquet Friday night, culminating with the Q&A session. And this time around, we're taking a step of faith. We got tired of turning people away because of spatial limitations. So we're going to have it at the Sugarland Marriott, which is very close to our church. The whole thing is going to be there. And that's a great facility. And you walk out, you can be on Town Square where there's multiple restaurants and, you know, some neat things to see there. But it's going to be our 5th annual prophecy conference.
Wow.
Thanks to a guy named Olivier Melnick that suggested we start these, and here we are at number 5.
I can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
So speakers will be, you know, myself, yourself, Patrick Wood, who's an expert on Mark of the Beast technology, Alex Newman, expert on the New World Order. We've got Russ Miller coming back again, who's going to kind of hold up the creationist side of the whole ledger. And then we have the great Dr. Paul Wilkinson, who you know very well. And he's going to be dealing with Christian Palestinianism, this idea that, you know, God is through with Israel and Christians shouldn't support the current state of Israel, etc., kind of diagnosing those heretical ideas and talk about a timely subject in light of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So we encourage people to go to profcon.com and get the full layout and sign up and stick around Sunday also. because we're going to have our speakers presenting during our normal church services here at nearby Sugarland Bible Church. So it's going to be a great time.
Well, every year it's always a blessing to get together with you and your staff. They're really, really wonderful staff, and the conference always goes very smoothly. And so I'm looking forward to that next February if we're still here.
If we're still
If we're still here,
yeah,
like my good friend Dr. Andy Woods always says, I don't have one problem that the rapture wouldn't solve.
yeah. And also, I would encourage people to eat dessert first.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah,
You
that's
never
right.
know.
That's right. I can subscribe to that. Eat dessert first.
Amen.
Now you were
Amen.
talking about Christian Palestinianism, and really, I think when I hear those two words, which in a sense it's an oxymoron biblically speaking, but when I hear those two words, I immediately think of Paul Wilkinson because he wrote the book literally, and when people ask me to define it, my quick definition of Christian Palestinianism is it's replacement theology on steroids.
Yeah.
And so I would like you, because I want to talk a little bit about that as the foundation for our show, I would like you in a few words to tell our audience, and most of them already know, so you don't have to go in great depth, but tell our audience what replacement theology is and why it is wrong. Maybe give us a couple of scriptures, and we'll start with that.
Well, replacement theology, sometimes called supersessionism, is the idea that the church has permanently replaced Israel in the outworking of God's purposes. And the church has become the new Israel, and all of Israel's physical, material blessings have been transferred to the church in more of an allegorical, symbolic method of interpretation. As we like to point out, they never transfer Israel's curses to the church. They leave those behind for the
I knew you were going to say that, so I was going to add that, but I knew you were going to
yeah,
say that. Yes.
we'll leave those with the Jewish people, but we'll be very selective and take the blessings. And it's just I don't know if I have words strong enough to condemn it. It's just a blasphemous, satanic theology that was introduced by Augustine all the way back in the fourth century and holds sway even in the minds of the Protestant reformers and dominates most Christendom type denominations today. And really, the major problem with it is it challenges the faithfulness of God and makes him out to be a liar. Because as you go through the Old Testament, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that there are promises there for Israel that have never been fulfilled. So you have to have a place in history for those promises to be fulfilled rather than just ignoring the promises or rewriting the promises. And that's the best I can do with this replacement theology. I thought every broadcast, I think we've debunked it, only to find more and more people out there buying into it. So
But
it's
when
just
you
one of those.
when you say, I think you're being too kind when you say it's a blasphemous theology. Uh, I I I connect replacement theology to anti-Semitism, and and you and I would agree that believers cannot be demon possessed, but they can be demon oppressed or demon influenced. A believer can be used and influenced by Satan to do things to further Satan's agenda. Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, it's not important whether I agree. It's what the Bible says.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, Jesus said to Peter in Matthew 16, after Peter had made a wonderful statement about the proper identity of Jesus, he made a statement about trying to talk Jesus out from going to the cross. And
Yeah.
Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan," to Peter. Nobody's questioning Peter's salvation. What happened is he stepped into the world or the flesh, and his mind was used there to be a platform and a pulpit for Satan, as was his words. And then you can go over to Ephesians 4:26 and 27, where it's clearly written to Christians. because it talks there about how you've been sealed by the Holy Spirit and all these things. And right in the middle of that whole discussion, Paul says, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger, lest you give the devil a foothold." That's not possession, that's influence. And,
Right.
we could take a guy like Martin Luther, who obviously was saved. I mean, duh. He did great things for the cause of Christ, and yet we know what he was like at the end of his life, as he developed hostility towards the Jewish people and wrote an anti-Semitic tract called "The Jews and Their Lies." You know this issue cold because it's in all your writings and teachings. I mean, that was just Luther giving way to anger because he got upset that the Jews didn't come
Right.
in, like he thought they would to his church, his Reformed church.
So
So he had
given to
to
the flesh. Yeah. Given
gave
to
to the flesh, and I could do it too, and you could do it too.
we do it. I mean, we're not proud of it, but this is something that on this side of eternity, we still are prone to giving to the flesh and not yielding to the spirit. That's something that we have to be. We have to be. And here we go. Hold on. Somebody always calls me when I'm online. It's typical. The now I was talking about replacement theology, and you mentioned about the promises, the curses, the blessing. In your experience, I just had a thought. What do people who adhere to replacement theology? What do they believe the land promise equates to?
Well, once you go into kind of this silly putty hermeneutic, you can make it whatever you want it to be. It could be heaven, it could be Jesus reigning in your heart, it could be the local church. And so I guess it just depends on what, theologian you're talking to. Or they try to say it's actual land, but they try to cram it all back into the Solomonic time period when Solomon expanded Israel's borders, the furthest it's ever been expanded. And they try to make it sound like it was fulfilled back then. So,
But that was not the full. They were not the full boundaries as delineated in the latter part of chapter 15 of Genesis. That's never been fulfilled,
right.
correct?
Yeah, yeah. If you look at what Solomon got and you look at the details, which these replacement theologians don't want to look at, but it
Right.
talks about how Solomon got territory to the border of Egypt. That's I think in First Kings 4 verse 21. That's very different than getting territory to the river of Egypt.
That would.
And as
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
and Dan to Beersheba, which is how that area was described when Israel was in it for 800 years, is very different from Euphrates in the east uh, to the Nile. If you take the river as the Nile, which I
Right.
do.
Yeah, I do too.
So the devil's in the details because I've heard people from time immemorial trying to argue that, there's no future land promise for Israel, that got fulfilled in the Solomonic reign, or they want to run it back to the time of Joshua, and it just doesn't work. I call it the ram, jam, and cram method. You try to cram all the prophecies into the past. So the land is either something allegorical like heaven, or let's take it literally, but pretend it already was fulfilled.
Right. And it has not been fulfilled, and it's that's important to remember. It hasn't been fulfilled, and also to remember that we have to have a literal, grammatical, historical approach to the Bible. Uh, I mean, nobody reads a book. Nobody, and I know the Bible is a is an inspired book, and it's written by human authors, inspired by the Holy Spirit. We get this from 2 Timothy 3:16 and other verses, but uh, nobody is going to open a book and said, and this takes place on a Friday afternoon in in Rome, Italy, in the kitchen, and they're going to go like, well, they probably mean that this was a Tuesday morning in Paris on top of the Eiffel Tower. That's what it means to me.
No. Yeah.
No.
Well, I think the key word there, you said literal, grammatical, historical hermeneutic. But if I can just toss in one more word that's very important, it's consistent literal interpretation.
Consistent,
Be-
yes.
Because these guys will argue for literal interpretation in some parts of the Bible. I mean, Luther himself used the literal method of interpretation in Galatians, Romans, etc., to overthrow Roman Catholicism and start the Protestant movement. But he never applied it consistently throughout, which is what dispensationalists started to do, people like ourselves around the 1800s. So that's why we believe what we believe about Israel, because there's no way, there's not a snowball's chance in hell, let's just put it that way, that those promises literally construed have already transpired. There's got to be a major future for Israel, and I'm not just talking about a future. I'm talking about where Israel is elevated again above the nations. And your consistent literal approach will lead you to that conclusion. By the way, it'll also overthrow Darwin and take you into young Earth creationism pretty quick,
But
also.
that's a nice byproduct.
Yeah.
Uh,
That,
okay, now you're speaking of Israel, and I'd like you to help me with that. The the idea that people are dealing with right now. I talk to people on a regular basis, and they say, "Well, I support biblical Israel, but I don't really support modern Israel." And that really opens the door for a lot of not just misunderstanding, but it opens the door for, sorry to use the word again that we hear just about every 5 seconds now, anti-Semitism.
yeah.
And so, is there a difference between biblical Israel and modern Israel in the way that God laid it out in starting in Genesis 12 with the Abrahamic promise and the covenant in Genesis 15 moving forward? Is there a difference?
I don't think so. I think Israel means Israel. I take Israel as a technical term,
Is it a people?
meaning
Is it a people? Is it a land? What is it?
it's all of the above. It's the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But God was very clear that in Genesis 17 now, that kings, that's rulers, would come from that lineage. And
Right.
he gave that lineage land. So it's everything. And it doesn't, that's what the term Israel means in the Bible. It never means the Gentiles. It never means a mixed audience between Jews and Gentiles. Israel means Israel. Now, sometimes it's Israel in belief, sometimes it's Israel in disobedience, but it's always Israel. So when people say, well, I like the Jews, but I don't like the modern state of Israel, you're making a division there that the Bible, never makes. And, beyond that, how could you say I'm not anti-Semitic? I mean, I support the Jews, but I don't support the modern state of Israel. Well, where do you think the Jews have gone to flee from anti-Semitism that they've experienced for 2,000 years?
That's right.
They went to that land. They went there because that was the last place they could go.
The
So
only
when people
the only
say I'm not
place.
only place, so people say, I like the Jews, but I don't like the modern state of Israel. Well, that is anti-Semitic because you're denying them refuge from the anti-Semitism that they've experienced in the diaspora, the worldwide dispersion for 2,000 years. So all these little divisions that people are coming up with today, I'm not on board with. And the last time I checked, God, whether Israel is behaving well or badly, God still holds nations accountable for how they mistreat that nation. And so people better start thinking this through, very, very carefully.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question was, people also say, well, but the Jewish people today are in unbelief and they're disobeying God, so why should we support them? Why should we be friendly to them? That's.
Well, I'll put it this way. People need to read Ezekiel chapters 1 through 24, and they'll see God condemning pre exilic Israel up one side and down the other. Some of the harshest criticisms you'll ever see in the Bible against Israel because of disobedience are found in those chapters. But then chapters 25 through 32 follow chapters 1 through 24. And in chapters 25 through 32, which is the table of the nations, you'll see that God, even though Israel is behaving badly, holds all of these nations accountable for how they mistreated his chosen people. You know, Edom and several nations, Egypt, several nations are mentioned there.
Yeah, Amon.
So a synthetic study of Ezekiel shows me that I can't play this game of I'm going to be nice to Israel as long as they're behaving correctly. And I don't think the nation of Israel is above criticism.
No.
God certainly criticized them, but I don't see this idea that it's okay to mistreat them as long as they're behaving correctly. A synthetic study of the book of Ezekiel would deny that.
Yeah, and going back to the foundational Abrahamic covenant, we have a covenant made between God and Abraham and his descendants through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that is unconditional and eternal, and it is. I've said it many times, but it is worth repeating. The Bible clearly teaches us that it is a covenant that is based not on Israel's performance, but on God's character. And how many times do we hear "because of my name" when God says, "And I do this because of my name, because of my name"? It's based on God's character. Even at the end of that famous passage in Jeremiah 31, 35 through 37, when God says, it's basically, if you want to know if the Jewish people are still here, look at the moon and the sun. If
Yeah,
the sun is still shining, Israel's still here, because
yeah.
God says, if you can destroy the moon and the sun and count the stars. And at the end of that passage, he says, "For all that they have done to me." So God is very aware that we, the Jews, have disobeyed more than our share. One time is too many in
Yeah.
God's eyes, and that's why we need a redeemer. But God is very aware that we miss the mark over and over and over. I like what you said recently in a podcast with our friend James Cadiz. When you were talking about those in influencer realm of the Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and I'd like you to repeat it the way you said it, because you probably said it better than I could. The difference, people are confusing two covenants.
Yeah. If you want to start your reading at Mount Sinai,
Yeah,
you can come up with, I guess, replacement theology. But the problem is Mount Sinai doesn't come about till Exodus 19, Exodus 20. That God entered into a covenant with Abraham that went back 6 centuries before that, all the way back to 2000 BC. So the Abrahamic covenant is the foundational covenant. As you said, it's a one-way covenant, Abram being asleep when this covenant was entered into. And it says, in that day, God entered into a covenant with Abraham and his descendants, Genesis 15, verse 18, giving them basically three things: land, seed, and blessing. And that can never be taken away. Now, can Israel behaving badly lead them into divine discipline? Absolutely. That's what the Mosaic covenant spells out, the terms of discipline, which is a totally different animal than the Abrahamic covenant. So, if I'm going to start my Bible reading in Exodus 19, I guess I can come up with a theology that, God is against the nation of Israel. But the Bible doesn't start in Exodus 19, it starts in Genesis. And Genesis 15 clearly gives Israel ownership of land, seed, and blessing. Now, whether any generation enjoys what they own, because you can own something and not enjoy it.
that's
I mean,
based on
I could,
obedience.
yeah, I could own a beach house in the Hamptons. For the record, that's not true, but let's pretend. And I'm too busy working to take a vacation. I mean, I own it, but I don't enjoy it. So a generation can't enter into full enjoyment of the Abrahamic covenant until they comply with the Mosaic. And of course, we know who the Mosaic points to. Points to Yeshua himself. So as long as Israel is a Christ rejecting nation, she will be the owner but not the possessor, we might say, or enjoyer of her benefits. And so
Enjoyer,
that's,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's the condition Israel is in
And
today.
the Mosaic covenant. Thank you for that. The Mosaic covenant. I think you need to read that, study that covenant in light of, if I recall, when I took that class. Now you probably took it live. I took it online because he was already with the Lord. Kingdom and Covenants with Dr. Pentecost. I think he said that one of the most, and maybe he might have said the most important chapter in the whole Bible is Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah, he said stuff like that to us. He called it the spine of the Old Testament and
Right,
New Testament for that matter, because that's what spells out the conditions for blessing or discipline.
right.
And you can trace Deuteronomy 28 right through the prophets. They all spoke of it when Israel was behaving badly. But I believe that he said the most important chapter of the Bible is Genesis 15,
Okay.
because that's where the whole foundation of the Abrahamic covenant is
Okay.
found.
So one of the most then. Okay. I
Yeah.
was a little off, but okay.
Well,
Yeah.
not by
But
much.
so so we have this replacement theology and this Christian Palestinianism, and it's stirring the pot, and it's in its um, in light of what's happened in on October 7th, and the way the world has really turned against Israel. We I think that maybe the enemy had many Christians, and this is just a thought I'm having right now. I want your response to that. Many Christians, maybe for the last several decades, have been in theological or replacement theology boot camp, so to speak, in preparation for where we are right now. Because right now, I think the level of anti-Semitism is off the chart. I was reading an ADL survey that I don't have the exact numbers, but it's around 340% in anti-Semitic rise in anti-Semitism in the last 3 years, and 980% in the last decade. Almost 1,000% in anti-Semitism acts. And like I heard recently, and I said this in one of my videos, anti-Semitism never stops at words. In my definition, I speak of thoughts, words, and deeds. Well, it never stops at words, certainly not at thoughts. We had words for a long time. Now we have actions. We have people being killed. And my concern, Andy, is that since October 7th, we've seen this surge of anti-Semitism, where really we should have seen, if not the whole world, but at least the church and parts of people of goodwill in on the whole planet come to the rescue of Israel and say, hey, you've been dealt a bad hand with this thing with Hamas, and they're just basically trying to commit another genocide, and we're going to do whatever we can to expose and to help you. And within 2 or 3 days, it was the opposite, and now it's just taken a life of its own. This monster is, I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And another survey of the ADL, and and I don't. The ADL is not the Bible when it comes to all this, but they do good surveys. They're a little too liberal for my taste on their approach to many things, but their gathering of data, I always appreciate how they gather data, and that's about as much as far as I would go with the ADL. But they said that currently, Andy, I don't know if you heard this, but this brings chills to my spine. From both sides of the equation, the good and the bad, they said that half the planet, 50% of the planet, harbors some sort of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist feeling, sentiment. Half of the planet. And I'm thinking, okay, Zechariah 12:3, the whole world is going to come against Israel, against Jerusalem in that context, but against the Jews. And I'm thinking, all right, 2025, we're at the half point mark. Half the world is harboring anti Semitic sentiment. And I never thought I would be saying this in my lifetime. And the
Mhm.
church, much of it seems to be apathetic and indifferent. What do you say to this?
Well, I would say, I mean, because of Zechariah you quoted, it's a prophetically significant because that's what God said would happen. He says every nation would would turn against Jerusalem and the Jewish people in the end time. So we're seeing that manifest itself. So to quote that great theologian Gomer Pyle, who used to say, "Surprise, surprise, surprise." I mean, I guess we shouldn't be surprised by this because that's what God said would happen. And another thing to understand is this happened in the Middle Ages when the Bible was not well understood. It wasn't translated into the language of the people. The Bible throughout Europe was chained to the pulpits. Only the priesthood, could interpret it. And in that climate of biblical illiteracy, and you know this issue better than anybody, anti-Semitism ran through the world just like a disease. And the more biblically literate Christians became, the more anti-Semitism went down. So I see the same trend today as churches are not teaching prophecy, not teaching the full counsel of God's word, or teaching, supersessionism, replacement theology. There really is no bulwark or defense left to stop anti-Semitism. So that's another reason why I see it on the ascendancy. I mean, not only is it prophetically significant, but largely we've brought it on ourselves through our apathy, concerning Bible prophecy. And you go to your typical church today, and it's all about, three principles for successful living or something. And they're not studying Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, Genesis. And that's why we're seeing this uptick.
So I agree with you, and fortunately, I go to a local church here in Texas. We're in the Dallas suburb where a prophecy and the Bible, Bible is being taught from a Jewish perspective, and prophecy is not being ignored, and so it's good. And as a matter of fact, we are having a prophecy conference towards the end of September, September 19th, I believe, in Rockwell, Texas. It's going to be organized by Hope for Our Times, Pastor Tom Hughes, dear friend of ours.
Yep,
And I believe you're going to be speaking at that conference, right?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be speaking. I'll be there, and a lot of prophecy teachers will be there. So if you're watching this, go to hopeforourtimes.com and register for the conference. You don't want to miss that one. It's going to be a good one. But it's important to be students of prophecy, and of course, going back to the contextual, literal, grammatical, historical, consistent study of the Word of God, then that is equipping us to look at things in their context and look at it properly. Now, what do you say, Andy? I'm struggling with that. What do you say to a person? They come to me, they send me emails, and you probably get them too, saying, like, my church does not. It's one thing that said my church does not study prophecy, but my church has not mentioned anything about Israel or prayed for Israel since October 7, 2023, once. Should I look for another church? What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that is an indicator that they don't think Israel matters. Because if Israel's promises have been transferred to the church, I mean, who cares about this bunch of silly people over in the Middle East? So if you're in a church that doesn't mention October the 7th uh, and the things that have happened since then, that's an indicator that you're in a supersessionist, replacement theology church. And the question at that point becomes, is that where you want to stay? I mean, do you want to stay and support with your presence and your resources and your gifting, something that is dishonoring God's character? And I had to make that call. I was involved with a church in the Dallas area during my seminary days, and they brought a missionary speaker into the pulpit who made the statement that the Jewish people today in the land of Israel are Ishmael, and not Isaac, meaning that the modern state of Israel is a creation of man. It's a creation of the Rothschilds or whatever. It's not something. It's not the miracle in the Mediterranean, that I look at it as. And so I said to my wife, that's I can put up with a lot, believe it or not. I can't put up with that anymore. Because if we stick around here, this puts us on the wrong side of the ledger with God. And we started trying to find something. Fortunately, we did find something that was a better, fit for us. And I can't tell people what to do. I just can only explain what for me was the breaking point,
Yeah, and
and
there
that
was
was it.
there was a person who told me that their church is one of those churches, but they are responsible. They're in charge of the Sunday school, and they said, "I teach Israel support and I teach dispensationalism at our Sunday school, so this is why I stay." And in my book, it's important to be able to teach the truth. But when you go to church, when there is a gathering of the saints, I think being fed is also very important. You cannot just go somewhere to feed, minister, minister, minister.
Yeah.
You have to be fed and ministered to. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and I'm in touch with their emotion. I mean, I've been there. Boy, if I leave, then what about the ministry I'm doing here? But for me, you get to a point where you're really not being equipped for your ministry from leadership or the pulpit. And what kind of ministry can you really have swimming upstream? If you're teaching A and the pulpit is teaching B, it's going to dilute the influence of your ministry. And so I just asked the Lord when I've been in those circumstances. I've been in them twice, once in California, once in Texas. I just asked the Lord with an honest heart, when is it right for me to leave? And you know what? The Lord is pretty good at answering. They'll either kick you out or something like that will happen where God makes it very clear that it's time to go. So if people are in that circumstance, I would just stay open, but express your concerns to the Lord. And if the Lord causes you to leave, He'll have a better place for you at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah, and that
And
I can testify to that because I've been in that place where we had to move on and we couldn't stay, not knowing where I'm not going to compare myself to Abraham. Started walking, not knowing where I was going, but in a sense, we didn't know what was next for us, and the sequence of events. Looking back, a couple of decades, we look back at how God is. And sometimes you get too comfortable in a place, and God is going like, okay, you've served your time here. It's time that I uproot you because you've learned enough. I've trained you for the next level, for the next chapter. So sometimes it's the way it works,
yeah,
and I've seen that in our life. And looking back is always a blessing. But in at the time of the event, you go like, "What's going on? Where am I going to go?" And
yeah.
that's where we have to have faith.
Well, we all know the famous "Don't be unequally yoked" passage, Second
Right?
Corinthians 6. We always apply that to marriage, which it has an application to marriage, but it
Business
really
too.
deals it really deals with a harness, as I understand it, placed over two animals. And if one is stronger than the other, animal A will influence animal B. And, Lot went into Sodom and Gomorrah, probably thinking he'd have a ministry there. But we know how that story ended. I mean, you can take Lot out of Sodom, but it's hard to take Sodom and Gomorrah out of Lot when all was said and done. And the other thing to think about, your presence financially and physically at a ministry that's promoting replacement theology, other people are saying to themselves, well, I'm going to go to that church because Olivier is there. Must be a good church. And so in the process, we're indirectly causing people to stumble. That's something else I had to wrestle with.
That's
So,
very true. That's very true. You're attaching your name and your reputation and your integrity to a church, and I've seen it happen at our church. People have come they've moved to Rockwell, and said they heard me say, I go to Rockwell, or and next thing you know, you got a family coming, says, oh, we heard you were here, and we've seen you online. And so this is a big responsibility for teachers like you and I, that we want to make sure that if we are going to put our name connected to a church, that it's a place that we can recommend. And by the way, it's the same with books. I have
Yeah.
had people quote all the time. If you have to use a quote from somebody because the quote is good, but the rest of the book really is not, and the rest of the body of work of this person you don't agree with, maybe you should find another quote, because if you have to put disclaimers after a quote, then it to me it's problematic.
It is. I'm guilty of that, as anybody, because sometimes even a broken clock is right 2 times a day.
Right.
And when someone says something really good, it's tempting to want to block quote them. But you're right. Um, People might think, I mean, whenever you bring someone in or quote somebody, you got to look at the tentacles that are attached to the person, whether those tentacles are good or bad, because those come in too.
That's right.
I've
That's
had to
right.
learn that the hard way.
Yes. Well, now I have one more question before we wrap this up, because this is something that I'm actually even thinking of writing my next book on, because I have so much time on my hands. Uh, you know that goes. Uh, but do you believe that position on Israel is going to be the final dividing factor in the end times church? But I'm talking about even before the rapture.
Well, I can only speak from experience. I have never seen something that divides professing believers like the Israel issue is right now, particularly since it's all come to the forefront post October the 7th. Our president, in my opinion, very wisely teamed up with Israel to launch some precision strikes to take out Israel's nuclear capabilities. And because of October 7th and what just happened in the Middle East, I've never seen something divide professing Christians like the division that's going on here. It's like you're for or you're against, pro Israel, anti Israel, and people that I thought were sound and solid. Boy, they're coming out of the woodwork, and I'm, as Romans 16 says, marking them and avoiding them. Because if they're not right on Israel, and that's such a big issue, what else are they wrong? What else could they be wrong about? That's what's going on in the back of my mind. And so I think this Israel issue is dividing Christians. I haven't seen a division like this since the lordship salvation issue. There was a dispute between Charles Ryrie and John MacArthur, who just passed away, as we all know,
Right.
concerning the condition necessary to be justified before God as a lost sinner. Ryrie said it's faith alone. MacArthur said it's faith plus submission to the lordship of Christ. In essence, is what he said. And if you didn't have faith plus submission, commitment, obedience, perseverance, service, then he calls it a spurious, not real faith. And I remember when that issue hit in the 80s, boy, it just divided people. And that debate has been going on for several decades now. I remember that very clearly. And I haven't seen a division like that until the recent events concerning Israel post October 7th. So, what is happening now today on this Israel issue is a big issue. And God is really revealing the true character and theology of an awful lot of people that I used to think were above reproach. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, and people that we used to call friends, and even people on the conservative side, which is very, very troubling to me, very concerning. But then again, we are at the 50% mark on the
Yeah.
world going against Israel, which is a big deal. So it's only going to increase from now, and so I just want to wrap this up, and I usually do it, but I'm gonna invite you to do it today, Andy. If somebody is watching, and they're going like, well, this is an interesting conversation. They're talking about, about God, about Jesus, about belief, about faith, about salvation. This is all confusing to me, and plus, I'm not really a good person, so it's probably not applying to me because I've done too much bad stuff that God would even be interested in reaching out to me. Anybody watching today who is not part of the family of God, what would you say to them?
Well, to the person who says I'm not a good person, join the club. That's our that's humanity's predicament. I mean, Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." And Genesis 12 verse 3 says, "I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those who curse you." Now, there's one Jew, one physical descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You better bless to be blessed, and that's Yeshua, otherwise known as Jesus Christ, the one who the whole Bible revolves around. You better bless him before you die so you can be blessed and have the guarantee of heaven and eternal life and the forgiveness of your sins. And you better not curse him. And you can bless him or curse him by either trusting in what he did for you or not trusting. If you trust him for your sin debt, then, as we like to say, you're in like Flynn. You blessed him, he'll bless you. You curse him by ignoring him or being against him. And by the way, ignoring him is a decision to be against him. And you die in that state, you're going to be cursed in the next life through eternal retribution. So this is a pretty serious warning, pretty solemn, and it's get on the right side of God now while you're still alive. And you can do that by blessing him, by trusting in the finished work of his son that he did for us on the
So
crucifixion 2,000 years ago.
you're saying it's simply a matter of believing? That's it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's simply a matter of believing. The thief on the cross did not go through a moral reformation. He just, in the end of his life, with no hope in sight, he just says, "Remember me when you enter your kingdom." And Jesus said, "Well, you need to get baptized first." And no, he
And
said,
get membership into a church,
yeah, membership and commit yourself. And he didn't
building
say anything.
gift to
He
the
didn't,
building program.
yeah, he didn't say anything like that. He said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise."
Believe and you shall be saved.
Yeah. And I'm not putting down commitment, obedience, perseverance,
No,
service, but those
no.
are those are growth issues.
Right.
Those aren't birth issues.
That is
There's a
that.
difference between being born and growing properly. There's obstetricians to help with the birthing process, pediatricians to help with the maturity
The growth
growing process, and that's the difference between an evangelist and a pastor teacher. One helps with spiritual birth, one helps with spiritual growth.
and
So yeah,
discipleship.
all that discipleship, lordship stuff has its place, but it doesn't belong in justification. It belongs in progressive sanctification. That's why, on the wake of John MacArthur's death, I would say that Ryrie, in that debate going back to the 1980s, had it right on that issue.
Right. And I would agree with you on that. Well,
Yeah.
Andy, thank you for sharing this time with me today on the podcast. As always, I always learn something, and it's your love for God and for His Word, and as a result for Israel and the Jewish people is obvious and is always a blessing to me. So thank you for joining me, and to all of you watching us today. Until I see you next time. Shalom and be blessed.